For the record, I am no longer the only one without a fancy background.
Yeah. So you all look like you're
Yep.
in,
You're outnumbered now.
you're being interrogated. That's great. Hey, it's William Tincup and Ryan Leary. You're listening and hopefully watching the You Should Know podcast. Today we're going to be talking talent. We're also going to be talking about Applicant Pro and isolved. We got a whole list of cool stuff to talk with Heidi. So Heidi, do us a favor and introduce yourself.
For sure. My name is Heidi Barnett. I was the CEO of Applicant Pro. We
Right.
just completed the integration with isolved, and I'm now the president of isolved Talent Acquisition. So heavy focus on all talent strategies and products. I live in Utah and love the outdoors, hiking, biking, all of the things that us Utahns do. I have been in the HR space for around 15 years. And my background is in marketing. So there's an awesome tie between hiring and marketing. And I'm excited to talk through some of those pieces today. So that's just a little bit about me.
I like all that. Ryan, I forgot to ask you how you're doing.
I'm wonderful. I'm
Okay,
wonderful, and I'm used to
good.
this, Heidi. I'm
You're
used
Yeah,
used to this being the
It
afterthought.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it does happen. It
It
does
happens at
happen.
home, it happens here, it just happens
Yeah,
everywhere.
yeah, you're more or less a doormat. It's
Yeah,
not anybody's fault.
I'm
yeah.
glad he did
So,
at least ask though. So
yeah,
this is a big step in the right
see,
direction.
yeah. Heidi, you've had a relationship. Applicant Pros had a relationship with iSolve for quite a while, right?
Yeah, nearly a decade. And it's been progressive over time. We started out as referral partners, and then I solved became owners, bought a share of ownership within Applicant Pro, and we started a more of a white label of our system after that, and then it's progressed from there. We just wrapped up the official integration of the business, meaning people, processes, and product itself. It's unique in many ways because we were already working so closely together. So there's not a lot of the pieces that come with, hey, let's, look at the product as a brand new piece. It is more of like it's already existing. Now, how can we enhance what we currently have? And there was obviously an efficiency play in here of like we're running two separate, CRM instances and two separate, sales org functions and all those different things. So we started to see that it became a little more disconnected, and we wanted to see some efficiency pieces there. I think the other piece that's a little bit unique about what we're doing is that we worked really hard to have best in breed in both areas. You have your HCM that iSolved has done a ton of work and customer satisfaction and really working with the customer on that side. And then we've done the same thing on the Applicant Pro side, and we worked as a standalone, but then also an integrated piece. And so what I see with a lot of other HCMs, especially as I'm talking to customers out in the wild, is that they feel like they like the idea of things integrated, but they also feel like ATS was an afterthought. And so what you're getting with this integration is the best of both worlds, best in breed that really do then end up coming together. And the other thing I think that happens a lot with integrations of sorts is that the team that you loved before and the team that you trusted then become either synergized in the process, or a lot of those things are handed over. And what we've seen uniquely with iSolved is that they're bringing the team over and then making a large investment. So I'm sure AI will come up in our conversation because it always does these days. But there's heavy integration, heavy development that's happening within the ATS, even enhance it more. So I think that it's fun to have a long-term relationship and have it progress over time, and really to be able to talk about it with our customers on both sides of the house about how this integration is different but can then benefit overall. So standalone ATS customers that are looking for a holistic solution now have more options, right? Because it's easier for us to talk about and display. So Yeah, that was a long answer for your initial question out of the gate, but I feel like there's a lot of differences that happen. You know, we fell in love with a product here. We were early users, early adopters. I remember the founders coming in and sitting with us, and when they sold, we were all really excited for them. However, we saw an immediate like dip in you know, our satisfaction, our response times. There were all these different things. We were working with brand new people. It seemed like they turned over all the time. And so that's the thing that we set out to do in this, was to make sure that it was a different type of experience for our customers as we went through the process. So anyways, wanted to hit on that, just how it is the same and different and how it can really benefit people overall.
So we often hear that hiring is broken. I want to talk a little bit about that because I know you've got some good perspective here. What is the most outdated hiring practice that you have seen recently?
Yeah, this is a really good question. I think there's a couple that came to mind almost immediately. I think the job application is one. It doesn't need to be so long. I know that a lot of HR professionals and hiring managers want to see the full gamut, but what happens is we're losing people in the process, you know? So the stat reads that about 60% of job seekers will abandon if it takes longer than 10 minutes. I feel like that is a
That's
long
long.
time. I think we're probably looking even like 3 to 5, they're gone, right? Especially if they're more of a passive job seeker. And so I I we talk about it all the time. There are ways around it. Like at Applicant Pro, we took it and broke it into 2 pieces, and we're like, look, let's capture the initial. And then after that, we can come back and ask for a resume. You can ask for, you know, references, or those types of things could come later in the process. And so like a super rigid, lengthy job application just is of the past, but for some reason we just hold on to it because we feel like we have to check a box or something
Yeah.
similar to that.
It's
It's
boomerish.
it is. It is. My daughter Heidi has recently applied. She's been applying for a lot of jobs. She's
Mm-hmm.
17, and she ultimately found jobs. But getting her to sit at a computer
Yeah.
to fill out an application was not. I mean, I've tried. I mean, we're in
Mm-hmm.
this space, and I've tried, and I failed miserably at
Mm-hmm.
it. If it couldn't be done on her phone,
Mm-hmm.
she didn't want it.
Yeah.
Or more importantly, the jobs that she ultimately went for are the ones that let her text back and forth and
Yes.
never I mean, she's 17, she doesn't have a resume. She's
Mm-hmm.
still in school, but they still required her to put a resume in and fill out a profile and do all
Yes.
the 3 she has 3 jobs, all of them, she did not have to do any of that.
Mm-hmm.
All she did was text back and forth with the people,
Yeah.
and they accepted her, and that was it. Those are the ones she went with.
Yeah, it's really true. I did the same thing with my daughter last year where she was like, why do they need my, my reference? Who would I even reference? Who would I put down as a reference? Why would I have a phone number of my, high school drama teacher or something like that, and it's really true. I think
And
that
if you
that mobile
do,
function,
what does that say? That we
right?
need to
This is also
explore.
true.
Yeah,
Right? I think
bigger
you bring
problem.
up a good point, Ryan. Another one that had come to mind is the response time. And so it's almost immediate that we, especially the younger generations, they want to have that interaction. They want to be able to schedule. They want to be able to get in. And I think that a lot of companies still feel like they have weeks to sit down, review the resume, progress them to a phone interview, take the phone interview, and then get the hiring committee together. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't a place for that, but I think that on our entry level positions, those that have higher turnover, we just don't have time to do it, right? We've got to get our response times better. And I think that that leads also to a candidate experience. Hop on LinkedIn, scroll around, you're going to see some disgruntled job seeker. And I'm not saying disgruntled in a bad way. What I'm really saying is we're mistreating them in this process. We ask them to give us all these things, to spend 30 minutes applying, and then their resumes don't upload properly, so we're asking them to enter all that in, and then they hit submit, and by at midnight they get a automatic rejection letter. Like
Yeah.
those types of things don't sit well. That candidate experience is not there, and I think that there are ways to do so much better with that process. And so that's another thing we hold on to. A lot of times we feel like on the HR hiring side, they're beholden to us, and we're going to, if they're dedicated, they'll jump through all my hoops. Well, that might not actually be true. A good candidate who has a decent job, who's maybe a little more passive, isn't going to jump through all your hoops because it's offensive to them.
Oh, and I wanna ask you a question, and then I
Yeah.
wanna see William's reaction on
Hmm.
this.
Love it.
Let's scenario land. You're interviewing somebody,
Mhm.
and they just pick up their phone and they start scrolling and texting as they're talking to you in front of you in the interview. How do you react?
I think I'd call it out. I'd be like, am I interrupting something? You know, I've had
My
a couple,
reaction too.
yeah, had a couple candidates, pop open their phone and say, are you okay if I took some notes before? Are you okay with that? And calling it out. But yeah, Ryan, that would be strange.
I have zero issues with it. And
Tell me why.
the reason is these are kids, digital natives. So half the millennials and everyone after that grew up on screens. And
Yeah.
so their entire experience with life is based on a screen. iPhone,
Mm,
iPad, laptop, whatever you've got, phone, once you get into that, their entire life is screen based. And all of
yeah.
a sudden we then take them out of the wild and then put them in this abstract construct that we created, and boomers created it before us,
Hmm.
of we've now got to have this really intense discussion where we learn from each other and kind of
Hmm.
find the fit. It puts them at a disadvantage,
Hmm.
in my opinion,
Yeah.
because we're asking them to play ball like we played ball.
But in a conversation.
No, no, again, we have conversations differently. Conversations are not a static conversations in Vikings and conversations in early English times. Conversations are different. They've been different. There's never been one version of a conversation. It's
Yeah.
always been fluid. It's like culture. It's been fluid. So to
Yeah.
think that, I mean, here's the thing. To think that they would can just throw that out and behave differently, I think it's unfair. Actually, I think it's
Yeah.
biased. And I
I
think
can
it's
see
unfair.
I can see your point here where I think about my kids in situations where they feel anxious or nervous. A lot of
Yeah,
times you'll see them scroll
yeah,
because there is that dopamine hit that comes from it. There's a calming sense for
right.
them because they live with their phones in their hands, right?
And now we want to
So
take them away from that. Now, and
yeah.
again, here's the deal: if they can have a conversation with you, legit, and still scroll TikTok, why do we care?
Mm.
They're going to be doing that on the job.
I
Oh,
I
why?
also
Like,
have had conversations with my kids where I'm
yeah,
like, hello,
yeah, yeah,
because even
Yeah.
yeah.
if
But
they're
see,
scrolling and talking, it will
so,
then
but see,
something will come up that's more interesting than me.
well, as it should. So the
As
thing
it
is, as parents, this is a fail for parents.
should. Mhm.
Is again, we think that they have to play the rules like we played. Like I've got to have all your focus on me because I'm going to say something important. First of all,
We're
that's
talking
arrogant.
about a job interview, not just a conversation.
No, you can talk about parenting or job interviews. It's all the same shit. Same stuff, right?
Hmm.
It's you're asking of them something that's um, not natural of them. And so, like again, it's like take any bias that you'd like to, and I can do the exact same thing. With people that are socioeconomically challenged. Excuse me, let's just say poor people. We
Mhm.
expect them to show up in a suit. Why would we do that? Show
Yeah.
up in whatever your best clothes are, however you're comfortable. Why would we expect that of them? We
Mhm.
expect that of them because we want them to behave like we behave. This is sociology 101. Like I'm not saying anything that like more professional sociologists, professors, and researchers haven't said for the last 100 years. It's
Yeah.
just we have difficulty adapting because we want to see the world a certain way and get them to perform in the way that we see it.
Yeah.
It's called social mores. So
Yeah.
we're just trying to get them to
Yeah.
adapt to our mores.
I can see your point. I think there's also some things, my son just went to prom and I had a conversation with him around here's some good social cues that you should take or things that you should do that I think would be, you show up to the door, if a parent's there, shake their hand, say hello, introduce yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
And those kinds of things, I think there is some training that could potentially happen in those scenarios where is it required? No. Would it be nice to have? Yes. Would it maybe set them apart or have them stand out in a scenario? And there may be jobs like we have jobs that they're on camera, they're
Yeah.
presenting. That obviously will have a different perspective than my engineers that show up and, you're on Zoom, but they smell like sleep, those kinds of things
Yeah.
where you're like,
Yeah.
it's okay that in that scenario, it's okay, but maybe I wouldn't want that for my on camera, sales executive that's going to be showing up to an enterprise deal.
Yeah. I think even in that social setting with proms, when they get in the limo and leave, they're laughing at us
I'm sure.
Oh,
I'm
sure,
sure
yeah.
they are.
because
I'm sure
like
there's a lot of laughing at us. Let's just
like
be real.
legit
Yeah.
going like seriously, I'm sure in that situation they got into the limo and they're like, really? Like that's not you.
Mm,
Like
yeah.
they're laughing at our our inability to then just say, hey, if you can come to the door or not come to the door. You
Yeah.
can sit on your phone or not. Like again, this is really kind of it's fascinating as we relate it to candidates
Mm-hmm.
because we're going to be doing, if not soon, now with more candidates that are like that than are like us.
Mm-hmm.
So it's our ability to adapt
Yeah.
or die.
And it may be one of these things where we start to challenge our own thinking and say, why do those things bother me, right? And some of
Right.
it may be
Right.
social programming where we
Right.
decide, yeah, my grandpa did this and he told me that I had to starch my white shirt before I went to a job interview and I had to be there 20 minutes early. And you start to look at some of that programming that could be social programming and then start to challenge that. Is that really how I feel? First of all. Second of all, could two things exist at once? Could it be okay for him, but maybe could also be okay
So
for,
the
a younger
deeper,
generation
darker
perspective?
underbelly of this particular topic is what's the difference between biases and preferences?
Mm-hmm.
That's a question. What's the difference? I'll give you the answer. Fuck it. Let's
Yes,
go.
please. I was like, I can
Pre-
fumble around on this one for you, but tell me.
preferences are how you justify biases. That's the difference.
That's how we justify them, huh?
That's exactly how you justify them. So if a candidate doesn't do things in the way that I want them to do them, that's a preference because I have a preference of the way I would like for them to behave,
Mm,
dress, talk, think, react, whatever. And so then I'm innately biased if they don't do them things.
hmm, yeah.
Don't do those things.
Hmm,
So people think about bias, like, oh my, we don't like this type of people or we don't like this type of thing. No, no, no. It's hyper personal to you and your preferences. So anyhow, great point, great discussion. Let's get back to stuff that probably would be more interesting to the. Well, I don't know. That's pretty interesting
I don't know.
stuff.
I did like that. That was that. Thanks for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hardball there, Ryan. It was good to kind of dive a little bit deeper there. Appreciate
Oh
it.
yeah. Well, he knew you were going to go in one direction. He knew
Yeah,
that I was
he's
going to
like,
go
I
in
can see
another.
Yeah.
she'll be more traditional than William here.
I just asked
100%.
the question and then I shut up. I
He's like,
just let
fight,
yeah.
fight, fight. I
Yeah.
love it.
How are we doing with internal mobility? Because you get to see with Applicant Pro now, isolved.
Hmm.
You get to see all the stuff that happens on the front end, but I can't help but think that you've seen what's happened in internal mobility over the last couple of years. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think internal mobility is becoming more and more important for companies, where you have maybe more constricted budgets. It's going to,
Right.
you don't want to lose that context before where maybe you could keep that internal, I don't know, knowledge holder and then add additional people. We're starting to see that that's not as optional, especially as last year, we felt a lot of slowness, whether you want to call it recession, whatever we want to call it, we
Right.
felt that slowness there. And so, what we're seeing is that need to have more internal mobility. We're also, this is a season of stay where we had the great resignation happening. It's the great stay. I don't know what, for lack of a better term, people are staying. And so I think that they're craving more of that internal mobility to feel involved in the organization, to feel important to the work that's being done. And so I feel like more and more I'm seeing this, and hopefully I think this is a trend that I really enjoy, is that it really should start with the job ad. And in the job ad, you're starting to see companies start to lay out, future progression within the org, or hey, we dedicate resources to be able to help you grow. We're going to start you out as a BDR. However, generally within 6 months, we see our teams turn into an account executive. And so you see those subtle things come into the job ads. When done well, I think it creates more hope and connection to the org. When not done well, you're going to have people come into the job wanting the job that comes after it, and there will be a heavy dissatisfaction that comes in. But I really feel like that it does come with a job ad. And then once you've got the employee in, I think through onboarding and training, as you start to weave in that, we want you to grow within the org, we want things to progress for you. Here's a pathway forward from your job into the others. Comes with a lot of proper expectation setting. I don't know if it's like with metrics or, we want you to be at this point by this time so that it can open up opportunities for you. And I think a lot of that is keeping it accessible. It's hard when you love your employees and they want to move somewhere else. And I think that that's something we can do with our managers better, is to really train them on having career conversations and don't feel like that is a direct hit to them personally. I'd love to hear your guys' take on this one as well, is that I've read over and over, people don't quit companies, they quit managers. And because of that, I mean, I can see it, but I think it also can be a dangerous rhetoric where when someone wants to move internally or progress in their career that isn't allotted here, managers may feel as though they were a failure in these things, which isn't always the case. I think bad managers and toxic leaders can add to that, and maybe that's where that quote was coming from. But I'd love to hear your
take
thoughts on that.
is extremely simple. Bad managers keep, good managers allow freedom.
Exactly.
That's it, kind of comes down to. And toxicity, you add that again, kind of anything illegal, anything toxic, that's completely different.
Yeah.
It's just the idea of, if you want to hoard talent, talenthoarding.com, if you want to hoard talent, you're a bad manager. That's it. Period. End of story. I don't care where you came from, who you are, how many people you manage, doesn't matter. If you're not happy for them to go onto their next greatest adventure, whatever it may be, internal, external, you're a bad manager. Period.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. I think there's another thing that we've seen, and of course, my lens of the world right now is hiring, right? So
Right.
one thing that I've seen also is that people will tend to hold on to their employees because they're unsure if they could ever hire anyone as
Yes.
good as them,
Yes.
right? And so
Yeah.
I think it's not as much right now where we have an overabundance of candidates in a lot of areas, but if you don't have confidence that you can hire again or hire right or even hire better, then you're going to be, that's that.
Again, you're hoarding, in my
Yeah,
very
you're hoarding
humble
for
That's
opinion.
where the
sure, for
bad
sure.
manager comes
And
in.
maybe it's
If you're
hoarding
doing
not
that,
because
you're hoarding.
yes, yeah, yep.
Now,
It definitely is
you
hoarding.
did strike on something that another thing that's quite interesting is people feel, hiring managers that feel that they might not get the spend to
Yes,
hire.
yes,
So it wouldn't be talent. I mean, it's still talent hoarding because you're not allowing that person to go on, or kind of frustrating that person to go on to do their next greatest adventure, but you might not get that money
yeah.
to then make that hire. In fact, just recently, the Shopify CEO came out and said, before you hire, you have to prove that AI can't do that
Yeah.
bit.
I saw
And
that. I thought that was really, really fascinating and quite a great activity for efficiency play.
Right. So
But
that might have
yeah,
even a good manager
Yeah.
rethink.
And I don't disagree with that thought either, though.
I don't either.
Yeah.
I don't either. Again,
No.
efficiency, Heidi's kind of nailed it. It is efficiency, but it's also a coy way of slowing hiring.
yes,
Yeah.
This is like RTO disguised as, well, we would do layoffs, but why don't we just require everybody to come back in? That'll lay off enough people.
yes, it
Yeah,
will.
I've had experiences both ways as an employee. I've had managers who couldn't wait to push me out. Like they're just like, "Hey, you need," in a good way, in a good way. Like he said, like, "Hey, you're really strong here. You need to go here. You need to
Right.
go." And they just kept pushing and pushing, and I kept going, which was fantastic. On the other side of that, I ran into a manager, same company, where it was just like, "Yeah, the only place you're going is to replace me." Or you're gonna leave, one way or the other.
Right.
And at that point, I hated the company, and I was
Yeah.
there for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just wasn't enjoyable anymore, and I lost all interest in the company. And then the continuance of that thought where I I had a bad feeling for this manager, his manager above for not recognizing that I
Right.
needed to go here.
Right.
And then it was parallel from there. It was just everybody I dealt with, I just had a bet like that they're not looking out for me.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
am I gonna go? What am I and it just created such a toxicity in my brain.
Mhm.
I checked out. I checked out and I did something else. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think that culturally there are some things we can do, and I like how you talked about not only your manager but the manager above, being close enough to the team that they manage to start to see some of their individual talents and to be able to lift some of that. But cultures that celebrate movement, talk about it, don't penalize, but really like celebrate. We're so excited for this transition and actually mean it, I think is important in that process. But culture becomes, obviously culture is something that happens, but if that culture would have existed, you wouldn't probably have dueling experiences within the same company, right? You would have more of a similar experience of people looking and progressing. There's a company in Utah doing incredible things. They just raised a big round. And one of the things that they have on their HR team is someone who is an internal job and career coach. And he'll meet with the employees in order to be able to coach them, to be able to say, where do you want to go next? I know you're a product manager. What interests you overall? Oh, you love doing video? Well, let's talk about what that looks like. And it may be within the organization, it may be external, but they have a full-time coach that sits with these folks and helps them. And what you get from them, I mean, they're all over LinkedIn. They're talking constantly about, you should come work for us, best place I've ever worked, career progression. Like and they talk about that in, you may only be here for 2 years. Like they talk about that in job interviews, and we're successful when we do that. And so I love that piece, because one thing I think that's tricky is we're asking managers to really have like intense career conversations that really, encourage cross-functional growth. New managers won't know how to do that. They're going to feel uncomfortable in
And
that
ultimately,
space.
AI will probably
Yeah.
be, as agentic AI will probably be able to do that better than a human being.
I think so too. Yeah, I think so too. But maybe there's a lot of different ways, like you're talking about agentic AI. Maybe it's a career coach internally that helps
Yeah.
to even coach the managers. But
Just
it's
the
a heavy
idea that they
burden
would
on the
care.
managers. Mhm.
Just the fact that they would care enough
Yeah.
to have something there, human or otherwise. I'd like to
Yeah.
get your working definition of culture, corporate culture. What do you, when you think about it, and these things change a lot over time,
Yeah,
and they're all opinions, so there's not a right or wrong. So
sure.
what's your, when you think about corporate culture, what do you generally, what do you think of?
Yeah, when I think about corporate culture, what I think about is what my employees say about us when we're not in the room.
Couldn't have said it better.
And I can tell them what I want them to believe. We can
Doesn't
have
matter.
these stuffy conversations in
Signs.
boardrooms. We can do all those things. It can be on our careers page, but at the end of the day, it's really what our employees say to their friends when we're not in the room of, what's it like to work there? That conversation is honest. It's very raw. And that is what I truly believe is the culture of your business.
It's a cocktail party, and all of
Yeah.
a sudden they say whatever they say. And the hardest part, first of all, I agree with you 100%, but this hardest part is that's based on their emotions at that moment.
Truth.
They could love their job for 2 years and just have had a bad day, and that
That's
bad
it.
day, they have a conversation with somebody, and that's what they get, that window into the culture. So that's hard to manage.
It is. Yeah.
Well, one of the things I struggle with is the debate over is culture top down, or is it really at the manager level in your group or your department?
Hmm.
If William's my manager and he's awful, and I'm just I had to go, awful, my bad.
Wow.
And he's just an awful manager. Like I'm gonna have a bad experience. But the person who's 3 cubes over in a different department loves everything. because their manager or their group is operating in a completely different capacity. But is that top down, or is it really localized into those smaller groups?
I
This
think
is a
Zap.
hard one for me to
Oh, go ahead.
answer. I'll give you my opinion and then I'd love to hear what you say,
Yeah,
William. But
sure.
it's hard for me to answer because I believe, my first response was bottom up, right? But as a CEO or a leader of a company, I have to believe that I can influence it, or I may just throw my arms up and be like, well, teams are going to have cultures and that's how it's going to
Sure.
be. And so I think that it's more difficult to do, but there's been times where I've seen, some cultural pieces play out that I'm not satisfied with. And
Mhm.
and so you can start to right the ship. And so I don't know if those two things need to be mutually exclusive, Ryan. I think that it probably is, at its core, it's almost like a lagging indicator of what the employees say, but a leading indicator is leadership being really directive about how they view their culture and how they want their culture to appear and to be. And so there has to be some belief that you can change it. I'll give you one example, and then again, I'd love to hear what your guys' take is on this. But we had a top performer, and she was top performer of our sales org, and I loved watching her numbers on the board. She was really aggressive in completing her numbers. She was outperforming her own goals, outperforming her peers, and she was really hard to work with. And so, after some time, I knew it was grating on our teams and I knew it was grating on me, and it was starting to, you would hear those side culture conversations. And so it came to a head, and we decided that it was time to remove her from the organization. And I remember feeling both guilt and some relief that it was done. And the thing that came after was fascinating to me. Our other performers that were still top performers in the business said, thank you so much. I now feel like I can be here again. And so this, I think, Ryan, it matches both of the things where it is culturally built within teams bottom up, but then from a top down, we can actually influence that to say, this behavior is not acceptable. And so I want to influence it in a different way. And we were able to make a pretty decent shift in cultural perspective within that sales team.
I think for me, one of the things that we have to get over or understand better is there is no singular culture. There's
Mm-hmm.
cultures. Your
Yeah.
sales team in New York, your sales team in Europe, they have their own. It's an umbrella of culture, and all of those cultures have to kind of be in alignment with the umbrella. But to think that everyone behaves and thinks the same way and all that stuff, I think it's a bit myopic. So I think just understanding that it's okay to have microcultures.
Mm-hmm.
That's one. Two, uh, cultures are fluid, and some would say at the end of the day, it's what you're willing to accept and
Mm-hmm.
not willing to accept. And in your case with the salesperson, we've heard that story many times
Mhm.
where they're great numbers, quotas, killing it, but to be around them, not great for
Mm-hmm.
whatever reason. In a male
Yeah.
case, it was more sexual harassment stuff, but
Mm.
it's like we've heard that story before,
Yeah.
and so the faster you can identify it and of things that you're not willing, and I say the company's not willing, the culture's not willing to accept.
Yeah.
And then the more you're willing to kind of go with that and remove the cancer, if you will, then everyone's happier.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's getting the happiness to be productivity so you can make up
Yes.
for that loss in product or sales or
Mm-hmm.
wherever it is. The last thing is Zappos had this right for their culture. So whenever you visited Zappos, you're on a bus, and this was for candidates, this was for everybody. You're on a bus, and the bus driver would, greet everybody on the bus and say their name. And at the end of the interview, the hiring manager or the recruiter would say, "Hey, what was your bus driver's name?" And if you couldn't remember that, they didn't hire you.
Interesting.
And the window into the soul of that is everyone's important.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just these five people are important. Everybody's important. That bus driver has an important job.
Yeah.
And if you can't remember, if you don't take enough stock in remembering their name when they stood up in front of you and told you their name and how long they've been at Zappos, the whole bit, if you couldn't take stock in that, they didn't want you. And again, that worked for them. I don't think that's a
Sure.
truism.
Mhm.
I don't think we should think of that as a truism. That's yet another thing is something that works at one company culturally doesn't necessarily work at
For
another
sure.
company culturally.
Yes.
Like we see this in HR all the time where they're like, and this happened with Zappos. They read it, they read Tony's book, they fell in love with it, they tried to apply it at their company, it failed.
Hmm.
It's so you got to kind of recognize that you are your own kind of unique snowflake or fingerprint
Yeah.
as it relates to culture.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I teach when I speak is that the first step to, a really good job description or a really good hire is really understanding who you are, and I think a lot of times we're talking about compensation, that's what people care about most. It's true,
Mhm.
but secondary to that, or sometimes on certain studies, it's the first thing is that they care about more about the culture of the company itself. But unless you know who you are, you can't talk about it in a logical way, especially those that go and grab a competitor's job description and drop it in and change out 5 or 6 pieces. It's not the same. And so, we were building Applicant Pro. We built it off of a lot of part-time moms returning to the workforce. We talked
Right.
flexibility, but we didn't just talk about flexibility. It was very flexible, and so one of the benefits we rolled out was housekeeping for our employees once a month, and it was an indulgence for these working moms.
Oh
It
yeah.
drew
Coal.
people in. They had, it was tied to a metric, and we saw also there was some social reciprocity that happened as well. They would
Right.
share it, people would get excited, they'd want to come work for us, and then we got some of that
Right.
that came through as well. But we're in Utah and Silicon Slopes. There's a lot of really cool conference rooms and really cool, gaming rooms and Nerf rooms and all kinds
Yeah.
of things that happen. And I could look at Applicant Pro and now isolved and say, we're not as good as them because we don't have these things. Or we could say, true to who I am, true to who I hire, I am I am focused heavily on them and they're going to feel like I'm the best for what we're looking for. I think that takes some true um emotional intelligence to be able to let go of some of the things that we call best practice or that
Mhm.
we say is like you said with Zappos, sometimes we'll brush with a broad stroke. Instead of doing that, let's get real about who we are and going to our employees and saying the same thing. Like when you talk to your friends, what do you tell them you like about working here?
Right.
Maybe we could pull a thread on that or add some resources in that area to be able to expand those out. If we know who we talk about who we are, it'll make it easier to pull in those people that we want to have fit in our
I
culture.
wonder if I would go further in the sense of knowing who you are and loving who you are.
Mm,
And what I've seen, what's failed in employer branding, since the beginning of time, is everyone puts on their best face. It's like
mm,
social media.
yeah.
No one talks about the flaws. And I've always thought that the best employer brands are the ones that actually lead with the flaws.
Yeah.
We're not good at this.
Mm-hmm.
We're
Yeah.
striving to be better at like just let's lay it all out there.
Yeah.
That's not a
What's
bad thing to do.
no,
No.
It's
no, it's
it's taboo for some reason. But it's not a
I
bad thing.
I think it's well, right. I don't. It might be taboo. That might be the right word. But I'm thinking because HR is risk management centric,
Mhm.
they don't want to put the negative
Mm,
out. They want to hide the negative, which is the
Mm.
worst thing to do.
See, I
yeah.
think it's just them being stingy. They wanna make the hire,
Could be,
and
could
that's
be.
it.
You
They
all
just
right.
wanna win the deal.
These
Yeah.
don't have to be. They're not mutually exclusive. They could
Yeah.
all be correct. All right, Heidi, we've got to do a commercial.
Okay.
Because we have a commercial. Ryan, you're better at reading commercials than I am.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, no, there's no reading here. We're doing a webinar together
we are.
on May 20th. It's 2025. So if it's next year you're listening to us, you've
That's all
already
right.
missed it, but you can come back and watch the replay. So May 20th, we're doing a webinar called The War for Talent.
Yeah.
Tell us, what are we going to be talking about?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it'll be a wandering path similar to today, where we'll be able to talk about a lot of different things. But some of the things that I'm really hoping that we talk about are labor shortages, but also labor
Yeah.
abundance, right? There's both happening in the market right now, but industries in particular, like restaurants and healthcare, small manufacturing, skilled trade, are really facing some of those talent shortages. So we'll talk about why, and then maybe some tactics to be able to combat some of that. And then also, it's interesting because we're seeing fewer workers entering the workforce. We have the gig worker, mentality. We have boomers that are retiring at a high rate. We have lower birth
not
rates,
with their
right?
401ks being eliminated.
I know that.
Oops.
Oops,
Yeah.
too soon. Too
Too
soon.
soon.
Give
Way
it
too
2 weeks,
soon.
please. Let's see.
Way too soon.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to it because I love doing these types of webinars where it's not, let's kill you with PowerPoint. Let's have a
Yeah.
couple
Yeah.
slides that are very important, and then let's get into a discussion. And we've got a great moderator that's going to lead us, and so then you and I can just riff off each other, which I
Yeah.
think is going to be. And those, to me, I don't attend a lot of webinars. However, I like though producing those types of webinars
Mm,
because I think they're more interesting to the audience and
yeah.
taking questions.
Yeah.
Allowing people to just throw questions at us and like, all right, come, hadn't thought about that. Let's go.
Yeah, I love that too. I think a
So
couple things, we talked about candidate expectations and candidate experience. We'll definitely pull on that. And then there will be an element of AI and automation and how, my view on it. I love William's view on it as well, of how do you replace the things that will then allow human resources to be human again, right? And talk about impactful areas within recruiting that AI can tackle for you. I think that those are some of the themes that you can expect. And like you said, we're gonna be really human on this. We're gonna be really natural. There won't be a ton of
yeah,
PowerPoint slides. Maybe the numbers, because I tend to wait,
yeah,
was
yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
54% or 50? I never remember, but I think some of that could be helpful. But I think it should be a really rich discussion about the world of talent right now, and how you can stand out and differentiate yourself.
So with that, stop the tape, put down your pen, go register for the webinar.
Did you say
Uh,
stop the tape?
oh yeah, you know
You
what that's a
boomer in it?
reference.
Come on.
No, you know what that's a reference to? All the career coaches of the 80s and 90s all would basically send out cassette tapes or DVDs. And so they would say after they do a bit,
Stop
they're
the
like,
tape.
stop the tape, get out a notepad, write the 3 goals that you want to achieve this month. And it was just a bit. I mean, they all did the exact same thing. All the ones that were significant, they did the same thing.
Mhm.
So stop the tape, go
Stop the
Yeah.
register
tape.
for the webinar.
The
Or
whole
hit the
point there
pause
is
button.
take
Ah,
action, right? Don't just
take action.
listen, take
Right.
action, go
Come join.
register for the webinar, and
Come.
yeah, because it should really be an extension of this conversation, and allow us to go even a little bit deeper.